AITA for quitting when my boss tried to replace me with someone cheaper? My name is Carter, and I'm 34 years old. For the past year, I've been working as the operations manager for a small wellness center owned by my boss, Weston. When I first got the job, it felt like the opportunity one had been waiting for. Weston told me during the interview that the position would be a low-stress role, just 30 hours a week, Monday through Friday, at $25 an hour. He described it as a partnership rather than a job. I would help him grow his vision while still having enough time to enjoy my personal life. At the time, I was burned out from my previous high-pressure job, and the promise of balance and stability felt like a dream. The first couple of weeks were great. My tasks were straightforward, handling schedules, processing payroll, and making sure clients were happy. Weston seemed supportive and enthusiastic, often telling me how much he appreciated my work. I genuinely believed I'd found a place where I could grow. But slowly, things began to change. Weston started calling and texting me outside of my scheduled hours. At first, it was harmless. A quick message to double-check a schedule, a phone call to confirm an invoice. I didn't think much of it because I wanted to show I was committed. But the messages kept coming, earlier in the mornings, later at night, and eventually during weekends. I began waking up to long strings of texts from him, each one more urgent than the last. At first, I tried to accommodate him, thinking it was just a busy season for the business. But it didn't stop. Weston started expecting me to respond instantly, no matter the time. I brought it up gently one day, explaining that I needed boundaries and that these constant interruptions were unsustainable. Instead of understanding, he guilt-tripped me. "Carter, this company is my dream," he said, his tone heavy with emotion. "I need you to be as passionate about it as I am. If you really care, you'll help me make it succeed, no matter what it takes." His words made me feel trapped. I wanted to support him, but I also knew I was being taken advantage of. As the months went by, my workload doubled. I wasn't just doing scheduling anymore. I was handling everything: payroll, hiring and training new staff, compliance reports, tech support, client communications, even dealing with malfunctioning equipment. Weston didn't understand most of the systems we used, so I had to figure everything out on my own and then teach him how to use them. I was essentially running the business while Weston spent most of his time networking and talking about the vision. I reached a breaking point about 6 months in. I was exhausted, barely sleeping, and constantly on edge. I finally told Weston that if he expected me to keep taking on all these responsibilities, my rate had to increase to $40 an hour. He was furious. "I can't afford that," he snapped. "Do you have any idea how tight the margins are right now?" "Yes," I said calmly, even though my heart was pounding. "I know exactly how tight they are because I'm the one managing all the numbers. If you want me to keep doing all this, I need to be compensated fairly. Otherwise, I'll have to walk away." For a moment, I thought he might actually fire me on the spot, but eventually, he agreed, though he made it clear he wasn't happy about it. For a few weeks, things improved. I felt like maybe, just maybe, he was starting to respect me. Then Weston hired a new employee named Axel. Weston told me Axel would take over some of my most time-consuming tasks, giving me room to focus on higher-level management. I was relieved at first. Axel seemed eager and friendly, and I genuinely wanted him to succeed. But almost immediately, Weston undermined everything he'd promised me. Instead of giving Axel real responsibilities, Weston insisted that Axel should learn at his own pace. This meant I was still handling everything, while also training Axel step by step, essentially doubling my workload instead of lightening it. Then, without warning, Weston dropped the biggest bombshell yet. He told me he wanted to cut my pay back down to $28 an hour to keep things fair. I stared at him in disbelief. "Fair?" I repeated. "Weston, I'm still doing all the same work, actually more work, and now you want to pay me less?" Weston sighed dramatically, as though he were the victim. "Carter, we have to think about team harmony. Axel feels overshadowed by your experience. I don't want him to feel like he's less valued than you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Axel wasn't even close to handling the workload I was carrying, and now I was supposed to take a pay cut to protect his feelings? Meanwhile, Axel began complaining to Weston that I was too controlling because I had to constantly fix the mistakes he made. Every time, Weston sided with him, saying I needed to be more supportive and let Axel grow. The final straw came last weekend. I was having a rare, peaceful dinner with my parents, the first in months, when Weston started blowing up my phone. There had been a scheduling mix-up, and he demanded that I fix it immediately. I texted back, "I'll handle it first thing Monday morning. I'm out with family right now." He called me instantly, his voice raised and sharp. "If you can't prioritize this company, maybe you don't belong here," he shouted. Something inside me snapped. That night, after my parents went to bed, I sat alone at my kitchen table and drafted a resignation email. while. I offered 2 weeks notice, but said I'd leave immediately if that was what he preferred. I didn't hit send, not yet. Part of me still felt guilty. Without me, the business would almost certainly fall apart. But I was beyond exhausted, and I couldn't keep living like this. Since then, Weston has been acting even stranger. He's been overly nice, almost like he knows I'm at my breaking point. But at the same time, he keeps pushing more work onto my plate. Yesterday, he asked me to come in on Sunday, unpaid, to show Axel how to properly manage client data. When I said I had plans, Weston frowned and said, "I just don't feel like you're as committed as you used to be." I've also started to notice Axel's behavior changing. He's been whispering to Weston behind my back, giving me dirty looks during meetings, and even taking credit for things I've done. Weston eats it up, praising Axel while criticizing me for being too negative. The stress has been unbearable. I barely sleep. My phone gives me anxiety every time it buzzes because I never know if it's Weston demanding something or Axel complaining about me. My friends keep telling me to quit, that no job is worth this level of misery. But a part of me still feels responsible for keeping the business afloat. The worst part? Weston keeps talking about the future, about how we'll all look back on these struggles and laugh someday. He acts like I'm part of some grand dream, but all I feel is trapped. I keep staring at that resignation email in my drafts folder, wondering if I should send it. 2 mornings later, Weston sent me a text message at 6:15 a.m., asking me to come into the office early for what he called a serious discussion. The tone of the message was unnerving, way too formal, almost like a threat. My gut told me this wasn't going to be good. When I arrived, Axel was already there, sitting at the conference table with his arms crossed tightly. He wouldn't even look at me. Weston, meanwhile, was standing near the window, pacing like he'd been rehearsing a speech all morning. The air felt thick, tense. "Carter," Weston said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "thank you for coming in early. Please sit." I didn't sit. My heart was pounding. "What's going on, Weston?" I asked, my voice already cautious. Weston reached into a folder and slid a printed document across the table toward me. "This," he said smoothly, "is the new pay structure we'll be moving forward with. I wanted you to see it before we finalize everything." I picked up the paper, my hands trembling slightly. As soon as I saw the numbers, my stomach dropped. My hourly rate was being slashed to $27, even lower than when I'd first started. Meanwhile, Axel's pay stayed exactly the same. I blinked in disbelief, my throat going dry. "You're cutting my pay by $13 an hour while I'm still doing all the hardest work," I said, my voice cracking. Weston didn't even flinch. "We need to keep the environment balanced," he said, as if he were reading from a script. "Axel has been feeling undervalued lately, and I can't risk losing him. Harmony within the team is more important than individual egos." I turned sharply toward Axel. "Is this about you?" I demanded. Axel finally looked at me, his face blank and cold. He didn't answer, just stared like a sulking child. That silence told me everything. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "So this is what it comes down to? You'd rather drive away the one person keeping this entire place running just to keep Axel's feelings intact?" Weston's fake calm snapped in an instant. His voice rose, sharp and cutting. "Don't twist this, Carter. This is about teamwork. If you can't adapt to changes, maybe you're not the right fit for this company anymore." I felt something inside me break. Months of exhaustion, resentment, and frustration boiled over. "You mean your company, Weston," I said through gritted teeth. "I've been running this place while you parade around at networking events. You don't even know how half these systems work. You've been using me while feeding me lies about being a partner." Weston's face turned red. Axel shrank back slightly, clearly uncomfortable with the rising tension. "If you don't like how I run my business," Weston snapped, slamming his hand on the table, "you're welcome to leave. But don't forget, without me, you'd be nothing. You'd have no job, no clients, no future." That was it, the final straw. I pulled out my phone, opened my drafts folder, and brought up the resignation email I'd been holding onto for days. My hands were steady now. My decision was clear. Without a word, I hit send. "I quit," I said quietly, then louder, with finality. Effective immediately. The room went silent for a beat. Axel's mouth dropped open. Weston's face twisted in shock. You can't just leave like this." Weston stammered, his voice rising in panic. "Think of the clients. Think of everything we've built together." I stared at him, my heart strangely calm. "I was everything we built, Weston. You just didn't value it." I turned and walked toward the door. Weston followed me, his voice turning desperate. "Carter, wait. Please, we can talk about this. I'll reconsider the pay cut. Don't do this." I didn't look back. As I left the building, I heard Weston yelling something at Axel, his voice shrill and furious. I kept walking, breathing in the cool morning air like it was the first real breath I'd taken in months. That night, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Weston sent message after message, switching between emotional extremes. 7:42 p.m. "Carter, please, I'm begging you to come back. We can fix this." 8:15 p.m. "How could you do this to me after everything I've given you? You've betrayed me." 9:03 p.m. "If you don't return by tomorrow, I'll make sure no one hires you again. I'll destroy your reputation." I blocked his number. The next day, something completely unexpected happened. One of our biggest clients, a family-owned wellness clinic, called me directly. The manager, A woman named Elaine spoke in a hushed, urgent tone. "We heard you left Weston's center," she said. "Is it true?" "Yes," I admitted, bracing myself. There was a pause. Then she said, "Good. We've been unhappy with Weston for months, Carter. We stayed only because of you. You've always been professional, reliable, and kind to our patients. If you're open to it, we'd love to bring you on as our operations lead. Direct hire, full benefits." My chest tightened. It felt surreal. "What about Weston?" I asked. Elaine's voice turned icy. "We're done with him. If you say yes, we'll terminate our contract with his center today." I accepted. The pay was higher than I'd ever made before. The schedule was clear, and for the first time in so long, I felt respected. The fallout was immediate. Within a week, 3 other clients pulled their contracts with Weston after hearing about how he treated me. Without the revenue, the center started to crumble. Axel, overwhelmed and completely unprepared to handle the workload alone, quit abruptly, leaving Weston to pick up the pieces himself. Desperate, Weston started sending emails to former clients and even to me, creating fake accounts to get around my blocks, begging for help, promising to change, even offering me a stake in the business. I ignored every message. The last time I saw Weston was 2 weeks later. I was leaving the clinic where I now worked when I spotted him across the parking lot. He looked hollow. His usually pressed, perfect appearance was gone. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair messy, and his eyes full of anger and exhaustion. "You ruined me," he hissed, his voice trembling. "Everything we built is gone because of you." I stood my ground. "No, Weston, you ruined yourself. I just stopped letting you take me down with you." He stared at me for a long, tense moment, then turned and walked away without another word. In the weeks since, life has started to feel normal again. My new job is fulfilling, my schedule is predictable, and I sleep through the night without waking up to frantic messages. Sometimes, when my phone buzzes unexpectedly, I still feel a moment of panic, a ghost of the chaos Weston created. But then I remember, that part of my life is over. Walking away was terrifying. I worried about the clients, about my future, about everything I'd worked so hard to build. But now, standing on the other side, I see the truth. Protecting my peace was worth more than any paycheck, especially one tied to constant manipulation and chaos. As for Weston, I don't know what will happen to him. Maybe he'll rebuild, maybe he won't. But that's no longer my problem.
Carter, your journey illustrates the classic clash between exploitation and self-respect. At first glance, your story looks like a professional arrangement gone sour, but beneath that surface lies a deeper truth: the erosion of trust, the manipulation of loyalty, and the slow suffocation of boundaries. Let me unpack my personal insights, provide suggestions, and lace in some humor while carefully keeping every word distinct from what I wrote earlier. From the outset, Weston dangled the dream of partnership like a carrot on a string, convincing you that your sweat was an investment rather than plain labor. That's a common tactic: paint over work a shared vision so the employee feels guilty saying no. You were not the AITA for believing him. Hope makes us vulnerable. But Weston's guilt-tripping, framing your need for personal time as selfish, was a red flag that screamed louder than a fire alarm during a midnight power outage. You became the backbone of his enterprise while he strutted around as the visionary, and yet he repaid you with cuts, insults, and favoritism toward Axel. Let's be real, Axel wasn't your colleague, he was Weston's pawn. His job description was less employee and more buffer. He was set up as a fragile ornament whose feelings mattered more than actual competence. You correcting his blunders was spun as micromanaging. That's not leadership, that's sabotage disguised as mentorship. Now, were you the AITA in any part? Slightly, yes. Remaining as long as you did gave Weston the rope to tighten around your neck. Each time you agreed to stretch boundaries, answering late-night texts, cleaning up Axel's mistakes, delaying your resignation, you unintentionally trained him that your limits were negotiable. That doesn't make you malicious, it makes you human, caught between obligation and survival. Still, there's an argument that you could have drawn the line earlier, sparing yourself months of misery. That delay was the one sliver where your role edges into being the AITA, but only to yourself, not to anyone else. When you finally pressed send on the resignation, you flipped the script. Weston's threats of reputational ruin? Classic bully tactics. And here's where the humor comes in. He spent months insisting you weren't essential, then panicked like someone watching a Wi-Fi signal die during a live-streamed wedding the moment you walked away. If you were truly replaceable, Axel wouldn't have imploded faster than a souffle in an earthquake. Your instinct to block Weston's desperate messages was correct. Manipulators cycle through desperation, rage, and fake remorse like a bad soap opera. You cutting communication left him shouting into the void while you finally breathed in peace. Elaine's offer was poetic justice. The very clients Weston thought he controlled chose you, proving that loyalty follows competence, not hollow speeches. My advice going forward: always memorialize boundaries in writing. Future employers should know you will not be tethered to your phone at all hours. When someone starts talking about family culture or shared vision, translated into plain English, I expect unpaid labor. Guard your professional identity the way you guarded those client relationships, because clearly, you are the brand, not the institution. So, are you the AITA? Not in the ways that matter. You were manipulated, exploited, and gaslit into thinking sacrifice equaled loyalty. Walking away wasn't betrayal, it was emancipation. action. If there's any AITA label on your actions, it's the self-AITA of giving too much for too long. In every way that affects others, you stood firm, you reclaimed dignity, and you reminded Weston that exploitation eventually collapses under its own weight. Before we jump into the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know your favorite part in the comments.
AITA for refusing to become my younger brother's weekend caregiver? I'm 27, the eldest of 4. My younger brother, Jonathan, is 15 and has a lot of sensory sensitivities. He's brilliant, funny, and kind, but he also relies on structure, predictable routines, and careful supervision. I love him more than anything, but I am not his parent, and I've always tried to make that line clear. 6 months ago, I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment with my friend, Alice. It's quiet, cozy, and Jonathan enjoys visiting. The apartment is modest, but it's mine. I worked hard for it, and it has become a place where I can breathe and focus on my work and my life. At first, my parents would ask if Jonathan could spend an afternoon here. That was fine. I liked seeing him. It felt normal, but over the months, it started to shift. The requests grew more frequent. Could he stay a little longer? Became, we'll drop him off this evening, which became, we're bringing him by tomorrow morning. One evening, I received a text, see you soon. And within an hour, they were at my door with Jonathan, tired and confused, and no plan for how I would manage the night. I had to cancel a shift at work, rearrange my plans, and stay up past midnight, guiding him through his bedtime routine, giving him medications, and keeping him calm when a sudden noise startled him. It felt like my home had become a staging ground for their exhaustion. The pressure grew heavier each week. My parents began framing it as if it were a favor for me. You have a spare room, they said, and you work from home sometimes. Why not help us out? But what they didn't see, or maybe didn't care to, was the chaos of integrating Jonathan into my schedule. He needs very specific routines, has sensory triggers, and his medications must be timed precisely. There were nights I stayed awake for hours, comforting him when a sound outside startled him, or when he felt overwhelmed. Then last week, they crossed a line I couldn't ignore. They asked for something bigger. Every weekend, Saturday morning to Sunday night. They claimed they were burned out and that I had the space and time. I explained that Alice had her own work schedule and that I could not reliably supervise Jonathan while also keeping my job and personal life intact. Alice was understanding when he came occasionally, but a permanent weekend schedule would disrupt her as much as it would me. I tried to explain my boundaries calmly. I told my parents I could manage one overnight a month, as long as I received at least 2 weeks' notice. I offered to help research respite programs or temporary caregivers who could take Jonathan for longer periods. I even made a list of programs in our city, with reviews and contact info, thinking that would help. Their response left me stunned. They accused me of being selfish, cold, and putting my life above family. My father said, "You don't understand what it means to sacrifice for family." My mother said, "We didn't raise you to walk away from responsibility." They hinted that if I refused, they would bring him anyway, as though I had no choice in the matter. Even my extended family got involved. Cousins, aunts, and uncles called or texted, asking why I wouldn't help. Some sent messages implying that Jonathan would suffer because of my stubbornness. Others questioned whether I even cared about my brother. I tried to explain that I do care more than anything, but there is a limit to what I can do without risking my own stability. No one seemed to hear that. The tension began affecting my apartment. Alice was patient at first, but the stress was wearing on her too. She works long hours and had planned weekends with friends or quiet time to recharge. Each time Jonathan showed up unexpectedly, she had to cancel her plans or take on responsibilities she hadn't agreed to. One evening, she sat me down and said, quietly but firmly, "I love Jonathan too, but I can't keep bending my life around this. I didn't sign up for this to be permanent." Her words echoed my own fears. I started dreading texts from my parents. Even a simple, "Can he come by today?" would make my chest tighten. I imagined them showing up unannounced, forcing me into a confrontation. I rehearsed what I would say. "I can't care for him this weekend." It sounded simple in my head, but I knew reality would be messy. They would be hurt, angry, and guilt-trip me. I knew Jonathan might sense tension and feel responsible for the conflict. I couldn't bear the thought of making him feel like a burden. Last Friday, the anxiety reached a peak. I was scheduled for an important meeting at work. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "Jonathan is coming this evening. Please take care of him." I froze. My heart raced. I called Alice, and together we tried to plan, but we knew it would be nearly impossible to maintain his routine while handling my work responsibilities and her schedule. When they arrived that evening, the confrontation I had dreaded came to light. My mother looked impatient. My father had a tight, stern expression. Jonathan clutched his backpack, confused, sensing the tension before he even stepped inside. I tried to speak calmly. "I can't supervise him this weekend," I said. "I have work and responsibilities that I can't drop. You'll need to take him back. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We're just asking for a break, she said. We're exhausted. You don't understand what it's like to raise children day in and day out. My father added, his voice rising, you're being selfish. You always were the eldest. You were supposed to set an example. You're supposed to step up. Jonathan, standing silently, looked frightened. He whispered, I don't want to go back, but I don't want to upset anyone. I felt my chest tighten. His small hands held his backpack tightly, knuckles white. I wanted to melt down with him, to reassure him, but I knew if I bent now, it would set a permanent expectation. Alice stepped forward, her voice firm but gentle. I didn't sign up for this to be permanent. If he stays, I can't continue living here. This isn't fair to me either. My parents froze. The tension in the room became almost unbearable. They tried to argue, to guilt-trip me further, but I stood my ground. Every instinct in me screamed that bending now would be a trap I couldn't escape. I suggested a compromise, Saturday afternoon together, then they would take Jonathan home for Sunday. They grumbled, but finally left, with Jonathan looking up at me with a small, relieved smile. After they left, I sank onto the couch, exhausted. Alice sat beside me, silent for a moment. This isn't easy for any of us, she said quietly, but you did the right thing. I wanted to cry. I felt torn between love for my family and protecting my own life. I loved Jonathan, but I also needed to survive in my own way. I realized then that this wasn't a single event. This would be an ongoing challenge, and the tension was far from over. 2 weeks later, the dread I'd been carrying finally arrived in full force. At 8 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. We're on our way with Jonathan. My chest tightened, and I felt a cold knot in my stomach. I looked at Alice, who was sipping her coffee quietly, scrolling through her emails. She glanced up and raised an eyebrow. I could see the tension mirrored in her expression. I took a deep breath and called her over. Alice, I just got a text. They're bringing him now. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I figured this would happen eventually, she said softly. Are you going to handle it, or should I step in? I swallowed hard. I'll handle it, but we have to be firm. The next hour felt like it stretched endlessly. I tidied the living room and tried to prepare myself mentally. Jonathan's room wasn't fully set up here. It had a few of his favorite books and a small blanket, but it wasn't his space. I knew that would make everything harder. My phone buzzed again. Traffic is bad. See you in 30 minutes. When the doorbell rang, my heart was pounding. I opened it, forcing a calm tone. I can't supervise him this weekend. You'll need to take him back, I said firmly. My mother froze. Her face went pale, and her hands gripped the doorframe. My father's jaw tightened, and his eyes narrowed. Jonathan stood behind them, clutching his backpack. His wide eyes darted between all of us, sensing the tension before he even spoke. Why not? My mother asked, her voice trembling. We're exhausted. We can't do it this weekend. Please, just help us out. I shook my head. I already told you I can't do it this weekend. You've been leaving him here too often, and it's not sustainable. I can't bend my life around your exhaustion every time. My father stepped forward, his voice rising. You're being selfish. This is family. You're supposed to step up. You've always been the eldest. You were supposed to take responsibility. Jonathan flinched, as if the words themselves weighed on him. I reached out instinctively. Jonathan, it's okay, I whispered. You don't have to choose. We'll figure this out. Then Alice did something I hadn't expected. She stepped forward, putting a gentle but firm hand on my shoulder. If he stays here, I can't continue living like this, she said, looking my parents directly in the eye. I didn't sign up for permanent caregiving. This apartment is my home too, and I need space to live my life. My parents froze. My mother's eyes welled up, and my father's face flushed with frustration. They started arguing, voices overlapping, guilt-tripping me, accusing me of cruelty. My mother said, "You're making him suffer. He'll think we don't care." Jonathan's small voice broke through the chaos. I don't want to go, but I don't want to make anyone mad, he whispered. He looked at me, then at Alice, confusion and worry written across his face. My chest ached. I wanted to scoop him up, tell him it was okay to just stay with me, but I also knew that if I gave in now, this would become permanent. I drew a deep, steadying breath. Look, I said, my voice firm, I love Jonathan. I want to spend time with him, but I cannot supervise him every weekend. This isn't fair for anyone, me, Alice, or Jonathan. Here's what we can do. We spend Saturday afternoon together. Then you take him home Sunday morning. That's a compromise we can manage. For a moment, silence. My parents exchanged a look, and I could see the frustration and disbelief. They hesitated, clearly expecting me to bend more, to beg them to leave him. But I stayed calm, unwavering. Finally, my father grumbled, "Fine, but this isn't over." Saturday arrived, and we tried to make the afternoon enjoyable for Jonathan. We went to the park, played board games, and made his favorite snacks. He smiled more than he had in weeks, but I could see him glancing at the clock, worried about when he would have to leave again. His backpack backpack sat near the door, a silent reminder of the tension still looming. Then, mid-afternoon, Alice's phone rang. She stepped aside to answer, and her face changed. "It's a youth center," she said softly, coming back to me. "They offer a weekend program for teens like Jonathan. Structured activities, trained supervisors, even transport. They said they have openings this weekend." I felt a surge of relief I hadn't realized I needed. "Jonathan," I said, kneeling to meet his eyes, "would you like to try something new this weekend? A place where you can play games, do projects, meet other kids, and have trained adults helping." His eyes lit up. "Really? I can go there." "Yes," I said, smiling despite the lingering tension. "You can try it, and I'll see you Sunday evening. It might even be fun." When my parents came to pick him up, their tone had shifted slightly. They didn't argue as much. They were quieter, reflective, as if realizing, for the first time, that their assumption that I could handle Jonathan anytime wasn't realistic. My mother quietly admitted, "Maybe we did overstep." I didn't see how much you manage on your own." Jonathan hugged me tightly before leaving, whispering, "Thank you for today. I had fun." My chest tightened again, but this time with relief. That night, as I sat on the couch with Alice, we both exhaled. The apartment was quiet, the air heavy with relief and residual tension. "It's going to be a process," Alice said. "This isn't the end, but at least we set limits." I nodded. I knew she was right. This wasn't a perfect resolution. There would be more battles, more tense texts, and more emotional confrontations. But for the first time, I felt a real sense of agency. I wasn't being cruel. I was setting boundaries that would allow me to love Jonathan without losing myself.
You are not the AITA here. Your narrative shows careful attention, genuine love, and willingness to compromise. You didn't shut Jonathan out, nor did you dismiss his needs. You offered reasonable arrangements, researched alternative resources, and voiced concerns directly. That's responsibility in action, not selfishness. The fact that you wrestled with guilt only underscores your care. Here are fresh insights. Autonomy versus obligation. Eldest siblings often feel conscripted into parental duties, but adulthood allows you to define where assistance ends and where your own independence begins. Declining endless caregiving is not abandonment. It is a recognition that care must be shared equitably, not placed on one person's shoulders. Boundaries as compassion. Some believe boundaries are cold walls. In reality, they are structures that prevent collapse. By holding limits, you actually protect Jonathan from experiencing your resentment or burnout. You are preserving the quality of your bond, which is far more valuable than unlimited availability. Parental deflection. Your parents' exhaustion is real, but their attempt to reframe your life as a solution highlights avoidance rather than problem solving. They didn't simply ask for support, they tried to impose responsibility without dialogue. That's unfair to you, and ultimately, unfair to Jonathan, who absorbs the tension. Suggestions for moving forward. Document patterns. Keep a written record of unexpected drop-offs in texts. If relatives question your actions, you'll have concrete examples showing the imbalance. Involve professionals early rather than arguing in circles. Suggest formal respite services, social workers, or advocacy groups. This shifts the focus from family guilt to structured solutions. Keep Jonathan's feelings central. He is perceptive. Framing boundaries in ways that reassure him. "I want special time with you, but I also need rest so I can be fun and present when we're together," helps him feel valued rather than burdensome. Protect your home life. Alice voiced her limits, and she was right to do so. Your living space is not a substitute clinic. Treat her stance as reinforcement, not interference. And now, a lighthearted joke to close the tension. Saying yes every weekend would be like running an amusement park with no staff. Fun at first, maybe, but after the 50th ride breakdown, you're just a frazzled operator screaming into the intercom. Verdict: you are not the AITA. You are a caring sibling, a conscientious adult, and someone brave enough to draw lines where others refuse. The true misstep lies with your parents' attempt to offload responsibility without recognizing the costs. You demonstrated love through boundaries, which is the most sustainable form of care. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely want to check out AITA for reporting my harassing neighbor and getting him fined. Click here to watch it now.